For me, it's always been about how you can connect with students. When you're able to connect with students, you're guaranteed a high level of success.
Right.
I could talk about curriculum development. I could talk about pedagogy all day. I could tell you about Lev Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. I could tell you about Jean Piaget's stages of child development. I could tell you about all that. But students aren't impressed by that. Adults are impressed by it. Those who are in our education realm, they're impressed by it. When you're able to talk that talk,
Good day. Welcome back to the Freducation podcast. Grateful to be here today. Today I have an awesome guest, incredible guy, incredible speaker, incredible educator. We have Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. Kwame, thanks for jumping on the show today. Appreciate having you.
man, appreciate you having me on, Fred. Excited for this conversation.
First time having someone overseas on the show, so I'm super excited to dig into your story. But just starting off, for people who don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about where you're from and what was growing up like for you, Kwame.
Yeah, so I think most people know me professionally as an educator, consultant, author, but the more important titles for me are father and husband. So I am a husband. I've been married for almost 10 years. So
Let's go.
my wife and I will be celebrating our 10th wedding anniversary in a couple days. So we're happy about that. And we have two sons, 7 and 2 years old. So that's our family unit. As far as how I grew up in Bloomfield, Connecticut, so in the New England side of the country. Both my parents were born and raised in Ghana, West Africa, and they moved to the States shortly after high school and decided they wanted to start a new family. So that included myself and three other siblings.
Wow.
As far as my connection to education as a child, well, growing up in a West African family, education was always something that was of a high priority.
Yeah.
My mom preached education, my dad preached education. It was always important for us to get the best grades possible and to do our best. So we knew after finishing high school, the next move was to go to college. That
Yep.
was that was the goal
That wasn't an
for
option.
all of us. That was the only option. That was the only option we knew. We didn't
Yep.
realize that there were alternative pathways
Yep.
like getting an associate's degree or going to community college or pursuing an apprenticeship or a trade. All we knew was after high school, you go to college. That was
Yep.
our norm. That was the messaging that was communicated to us. And so, a little bit about my K-12 schooling. I actually started my first 4 or 5 grades as a special education student. So I was in a self-contained learning support room, had an IEP during that time. So early on, I did deal with some ableism. There
Yeah.
was some ridicule from classmates and other peers. And having parents who were immigrants from Africa, there were jokes about Africa at that time too. So growing up in the 90s as an elementary school student and having to hear Lion King jokes, that wasn't always fun.
Yeah.
But that was something I had to deal with at that time. But these were all experiences that shaped who I became.
Yeah.
And after my sixth grade year, I actually ended up moving to Ghana with my father and my younger sister. And that turned out to be a pivotal point in my life because up until the time that we moved, of course, I knew where I came from. I knew that my parents came from Ghana. I knew what languages they spoke. We always ate our food every day. So I was very much aware of that part. But in terms of the actual culture itself, living in that culture, that was a first
Yeah.
outside of
Wow.
visiting the country for a couple of weeks at a time when I was younger. So to be living there for an extended period of time and to also go to school in Ghana,
Yeah.
That really that really got me exposed to how different the education system is in other countries compared to the United States. So
Right.
in Ghana,
Wow.
class sizes were big. I was in a class of 50 students, one teacher, and all we did was copy notes
Yeah.
and do work in our exercise books. There wasn't anything to the effect of inclusive education. There
Right.
was no small group instruction. There was no collaborative learning. Everything was individualized. You were pretty much on your own.
Right.
And there was high stakes testing involved as well. So, which then led to a lot of competition. So every
Mm-hmm.
child's trying to get the highest grades in order to get into the best possible high school at that time.
Yeah.
So that was really my experience in Ghana. And then also another fun fact in Ghana, the teachers at that time had canes or switches.
Okay.
So you know how in the States there's no corporal punishment that should be happening in schools. Well, in Ghana, you pretty much
That's not.
could touch any child you want. Teachers had the license to whoop a child, punish them,
Wow.
do all kinds of things, and that was from ages 12 to 15. So
Mm-hmm.
imagine having to experience that after going all these years without a teacher touching you like that. Now you go into a
Right.
culture where a teacher is whooping you, and that's the norm. That was something that was a bit of a shock, but I knew what not to do in order
Yeah.
to get caught in that situation. So I adjusted real quickly. But I think when I look at how these experiences shape who I became as a teacher, it made me realize that in the United States, we're very
Right.
privileged, um, especially when you consider the fact that you have free reduced lunch.
Yeah.
You also have such a thing as what? Textbooks. You have to buy your own
Right.
textbooks, and
Yeah.
taxpayers are paying for you to go to school.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go to a place like Ghana, you got to pay for your school fees. And if you
Yeah.
don't pay for
Yeah.
your school fees, it doesn't matter how smart you are, you get kicked out of school.
Yeah.
So seeing those different, experiencing those different things really helped to shape my idea of what it meant to be an educator.
You have such a unique perspective on the education system based on your experience. I got so many questions I can ask from there, but starting off, so you grew up in New England. Your parents are from Ghana. So you're going to school. You speak English without an accent. Obviously, at home, you're living. You basically have a two culture life, essentially, right? Like you've got your culture from Ghana at home, and then you go to school, and it's this American culture. How like were you part of like the only immigrant family, or were there a lot of others? Like were you like a complete anomaly at school, or were there people you could blend in with? What was that experience like at a young age?
Yeah, so there were definitely other immigrant families, but as far as like a Ghanaian family,
Yeah,
I think there was one other family that came from Ghana
yeah,
who my parents knew. They
yeah.
were family friends with them. So
Okay.
I wasn't so much an anomaly in that sense. I think I was more of an
Yeah.
anomaly in the sense that I was so much darker than
Okay.
everybody else in terms of skin
Yeah.
complexion.
Yeah.
So I dealt with a lot of colorism.
Right.
And this is something that I've said in on other podcasts where I can remember at lunchtime, a classmate would take a milk carton, right, and put it next to my face to compare which one was darker. And they
Wow.
make jokes about that. So, I mean, that was part of my experience. But as far as an anomaly, I was an anomaly in that sense, but also, my name. My name
Right.
is very unique.
Yeah.
There's nothing English about it,
Yeah.
nothing Anglo-Saxon about it. It's very much a Ghanaian name.
Yeah.
So, there were some people who had trouble pronouncing the name and they would just kind of brush over it. Like those were just some of the things that I experienced at that time,
Yeah.
but also even still now, so as an adult, I still experience some of those things.
Right. What when you were put in ESE at a young age like that? Because I know a lot of times it just broadly that title is put on you and it's stuck on you for a long time. Did you know that was happening? Like coming in when you're that little, sometimes you don't know what the process is. You just kind of roll with it. Like, was it something you were aware of that you're being put in this label, or was it just like, oh, I guess this is what's happening? Like, at what point did you realize that was the circumstance?
I mean, I definitely knew that I was
Yeah.
in a self-contained learning support classroom,
Yeah.
especially once I got to my later elementary school years,
Yeah.
and I saw that I wasn't riding the traditional yellow school bus like everybody else. I was riding a
Right.
small van.
Yeah.
Like there were different ways in which I and my other classmates were being othered
Yeah.
in that sense. So I always knew that I was going down a different path.
Right.
So that was never a secret to me. And you become self-conscious about that because people let you know
Right.
what their perceptions are of you based on that label. So yeah, it
Yeah.
was definitely not a surprise or secret.
And when you moved back to Ghana or moved there for yourself the first time, how long was that for? Like, was it a temporary thing, or was it like we're going back for an undetermined amount of time?
So we always knew that it was going to be a 3-year stint. So I
Okay.
knew that after the 3 years, I'll be back in the United States, attending
Yeah.
high school. So that was always the plan. So I knew that was the window.
Yeah. You mentioned the school. So I lived in Mexico for a year, and it stood out to me so much that you said it. Like even public school students, they have to pay for their transportation, they have to pay for their books, they have to pay for their uniforms. There was 40 some kids in a classroom, but there was not discipline problems because there was just a sense of respect for the classroom that is just not the case in the US. And I find it fascinating that you said like the US is such a privileged school system. For example, now a lot of kids get laptops for free. Oftentimes free breakfast, free lunch, bus ride to school. Like everything is handed to you. And the way I've experienced it is it's the most privileged school system, but often like the least engaged. And the behavior's all over the place. And I found, I haven't been to Africa, but in my experience in Mexico and other countries I've been to, it was kind of like you said, like the school system is behind in terms of how content is being delivered. Like it's kind of this old school, like, all right, I'm going to give notes and you're going to write them and you're going to copy them. But they have the stage set in that, like, there's a respect for teachers in the school system. So, how was that? I mean, you go over there and it's like you're in this whole different world of an education experience. Did you feel like you were learning more or less, or I mean, how was that whole transition? Because going from school in the U.S. where you're basically compartmentalized over here to now you're in a whole different school system, and then coming back, what was that like?
Um, before I answer that question, you mentioned that the students in Mexico had a lot of respect for the teachers, and that
Yeah,
was the same thing in Ghana.
yeah,
Like, I don't remember a student talking back to a teacher or cursing at a teacher
right.
or anything like that.
Unheard
These
of.
were things that were practically daily occurrences when I was teaching in the classroom. It was like the norm.
Yes.
You know, it got to a point where for some students, it was normal for them to, call you an MF just out of nowhere.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, it to the point where it felt weird if you didn't get called that.
Right.
Cause that kind of became an adrenaline rush, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
no, but seriously, to answer your question, as far as how I was able to adjust back to the system, back to the
Yeah.
United States, the biggest thing I realized, Fred, was I felt like I was ahead of my peers academically because of the time I spent. And I'm not sure why that was the case. I knew that I had to do a lot more work.
Right.
And like you said, I had to grind for everything. I had to buy my own books. There was nothing handed to me. So
Yeah.
to now be in a position where I now had to figure out, um, I now had to like figure out, okay, how to reacclimate myself into the States.
Yeah.
It didn't take long at all.
Yeah.
I think what was interesting for me was when I moved back, I moved to a predominantly white town in Connecticut. So it's
Yeah.
different from the town I was living in before the move.
Right.
So that was more of a culture shock.
Yeah.
Being at a high school where you are one of the few black students
Right.
out of 500 enrolled,
Yeah.
that was a huge shock for me,
Yeah.
easily.
Was it, at what point did you decide that you wanted to go into education? Like, was there a part of the experience was like, this was so hard for me that I want to change that experience for people after me? Or what was kind of the process of you saying, I want to go into education?
Yeah, I think for me, it was kind of a slow process. So when I first got to college in Philadelphia at Temple University, shout out to Temple, go Owls. I actually ended up volunteering at a mentoring program
Okay.
my freshman year. And in that program, I was assigned a middle school student who turned out to be my mentee for a couple of months.
Yeah.
And from that experience, I got hooked to just working with kids and I
Yeah.
wanted more of it. So the following year, my sophomore year, I ended up getting a work study job at the local YMCA, which was a few blocks from the school's main campus.
Cool.
And I would spend a couple hours a week participating in that school program as a tutor, as a mentor. And that was cool too because that really got me to see the inequities
Right.
that students were experiencing
Yeah.
in their schools, but also the different socioeconomic levels as well. So even
Yeah.
though I'm surrounded by black boys, black girls, and black people, and I'm
Yeah.
black, my experience was very different from my students' experience.
Right.
Compared to them, I had access to a lot of things that they didn't have access to.
Right.
So I felt
Yeah.
very privileged.
Yeah.
So there was a learning curve there in terms of understanding how they were growing up, and for some students, how quickly they had to grow up in
Yeah.
order to be the main caregiver in their household because of
Right.
certain circumstances. So really learning about those different experiences really helped to shape my understanding of what it meant to, be in the hood or to
Yeah.
be in an urban setting where you don't
Right.
have access to a lot of different amenities
Yeah.
and different things that you need in order
Yeah.
to survive on a day-to-day basis. So I experienced that. I would end up working at this YMCA for the next 4 years up until I graduated.
Yeah.
And once I finished with my undergrad, which was in mathematics, I had to make a decision. I knew that I loved working with kids. I knew that I loved doing math.
Right.
What will be a profession that will allow me to marry those two passions? And
Yeah.
it turned out to be being a math teacher.
That's cool.
So shortly after I graduated, I enrolled in an AmeriCorps program called Education Works,
Okay.
which basically was a 1 to 2 year program where you would work full time at a Title I school um, in Philadelphia, Jersey, or anywhere in the tri-state area. So in my case, I was in Philadelphia, and you would work 45, 50 hours a week. You would
Okay.
be a teaching assistant. You would supervise recess. You would do lunch duty, and you would also be a counselor at an after-school program for that school.
Cool.
So every day, I was in the school from about 7 to 7:30 to about 5 in the evening,
Yeah.
and I
Oh, you
did
were.
that for a year and a half, Fred. But the thing that drew me to this opportunity was the fact that I could gain good experience,
Right.
but most importantly, I was going to get an education award after my 2 terms were done. And that
Cool.
education award allowed me to pay for almost my first year of grad school. So I ended up going back to Temple to get my master's and
Yeah.
my initial teaching cert for Pennsylvania. And once I was able to graduate from that program in 2010, then that's when everything else started to fall into place. So I started to teach right away in Philly
Awesome.
as a middle school math teacher. Did that for 5 years. Eventually moved to Boston, where I taught for another 4 years in that same capacity.
Yeah.
And then my wife got an awesome opportunity with the Peace Corps, which allowed our family to move to the continent, to Africa, in
Awesome.
2019. And we've been on the continent ever since then.
That's so awesome. There's a lot to dig into there. So I want to go back to you finished college and that's when you started this year and a half program where you're working in schools in Philly. But you already graduated college at this point, or were you still
Yes,
at
I finished
Temple?
my undergrad.
Okay,
I finished
cool.
my undergrad and then I went into that program.
Were you at one school, like were you in elementary school, middle school, or did you move around to different campuses?
So I was at the same school for the whole Education Works program, same K
Cool.
to 8 school.
So you got to really build relationships with kids in the community during that time.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
And is that the time where it was like, I mean, I know for a lot of people they kind of dip their toes in, like in that you're not fully a teacher, but you're getting that experience. Did that solidify that? Okay, now I want to become a teacher. Like I'm going to do this.
Yeah, for sure. And then the one thing that I noticed too was I was in a school where 90% of the kids were Black and
Yeah,
Latinx,
yeah,
but then the converse of that was the teachers look more like you.
right,
I was
yeah.
like
It
90% of teachers look
didn't
like you.
match. Right. Yeah,
Very, she's very white.
yeah,
So I'm thinking to myself, why is it the case?
right.
And there were a lot of good teachers in that building, but
Yeah,
there are a few that had great intentions, but just didn't know how to connect with the students.
right.
And I'm watching, and I kept thinking to myself, why don't we see enough teachers who look like me
Yeah,
standing in front of the classroom?
yeah,
And that's when it dawned on me that this is something that I could do. I could be that person standing in front of the classroom, providing a different pathway, a different narrative
yeah,
for students. So often we think about Black boys, the first thing that comes to mind is professional athlete,
right.
being a rapper or a musician, some position in entertainment.
Yeah,
How often do you hear about a young Black boy wanting to become an educator?
right.
That's what came to my mind. And I thought to myself, I'm close enough to their age
Yeah,
and I'm hip still,
yeah,
so I could connect with them on that level. And I could tell them why it's valuable for them to get an education. I could provide some lessons for them that will help them in life. So
yeah,
when I thought about the possibilities there, as well as the work I was already doing through
yeah.
this Education Works program, I knew this was the right path to go. And that's what sealed the deal for me.
That's awesome. So I love that you just saw a problem and you said, okay, we've got 90% of the students in the school are minorities. They're black, they're Latino, and the teachers aren't. And it was kind of like the first thing is, well, like, why doesn't somebody step up and change this? And you looked at it and was like, well, I can make a difference here, so let me step up and step in, and you did. So did you, I mean, you kind of proposed a question there, like, why did the teachers not look like the students? Did you find an answer for that? Like, what do you think the reason is that, we got schools that are 70, 80, 90, sometimes 99% black or Hispanic, and the teachers are mostly white? Did you figure out why, or at least in that community, what the reasoning is for that?
I mean, at the time, I thought it was more of an economical decision
Yeah,
because if you think about it, when you look at professional athletes and you look at entertainers, they make a lot of money
yeah,
and they get to wear cool stuff. They get
yeah,
to wear lots of jewelry.
yeah,
They get to wear a lot of expensive clothes,
yeah,
name brand clothing that kids aspire to get in these neighborhoods.
yeah,
Teachers, we're not rocking bling. We're not wearing ice. We're not doing all that. Some of us are, but the large
yeah,
majority of us are not doing that.
right,
So we compare the lifestyles.
yeah,
Which one, as a 12-year-old, as a 13-year-old, which one would you aspire to become more of? The
yeah,
superstar, athlete slash entertainer, or a neighborhood teacher? So I
the
think
answer
at
to,
that time, it was more about money.
right,
Can I get a lot of
100%,
money being a teacher? That's
right,
really what it came down to. Now, as I've, gone deeper and deeper into the education game and I've been there for almost 2 decades now, I've come to realize that money is one thing,
hmm,
but it's also an issue of a lack of exposure and
right,
also marketing too. Are we properly marketing how cool it is to be an educator? Especially now. I
yeah,
mean, if you just go on social media alone, even if you look at the first few episodes of your podcast, you've had a lot of phenomenal black
yeah,
educators who are doing some innovative
right,
things. And
yeah,
they're
100%,
and they're relatively young. Imagine if our students were to see them every day in the classroom. That would want them that would inspire them to want to become a teacher. There's no way you
yeah,
could tell me that it wouldn't inspire them. So I believe that
100%,
we have to do a better job in marketing the benefits of being a teacher outside the
yeah,
classroom. We look at the fact that you have teachers who are doing so many different things outside of being a teacher. You have teachers who are musicians. I have
yeah,
teacher friends who are DJs. I
yeah,
have teacher friends who are performing artists. They rap,
yeah,
they sing. Um, I have teacher friends who run businesses
hmm,
outside of teaching, photography business. Um, some have photo booths. Some, are doing some other cool jobs.
yeah,
And teaching is not the only thing they're doing. I know some who actually have their own apparel and
yeah,
they sell t-shirts and accessories to different people. And that's how they earn additional income. So
yeah,
there's so many different pathways that you could take as a teacher that a lot of young people aren't even aware of
yeah.
because of the messages that they've always been communicated about teaching.
Yeah, I agree. I think marketing's a big deal in it. And I think too, I mean, teacher pay is not something we can control, but teachers deserve to be paid so much better. And if they did, there'd be more people lining up to teach. And I think that you mentioned like having the other careers while you're teaching. Like I know there was a gentleman I was talking to and he was looking for work and he was really into data and I was like, "Man, like you're good at math, you're good at data. Why don't you while you're looking for a job, go teach. do that for a few years, you can really serve your school and your community with your ability to work with data, but you're also making an impact on your students. And then you might end up staying and teaching, but even if not, now you've got a few years where you're serving the community, you're teaching, and you're able to hone your skills because like data is such a big part of school now. Like do what you do well, do it for a school, and then you can always go on and do something else after. Like I think people look at a lot of careers and I need to commit to it for life, and obviously it's great when people stay in teaching for 20, 30, 40 years because there's such a high need. But even if you go in and you serve and you teach for 2, 3, 4 years, you're filling a huge hole in the community and you're getting to make a positive impact. And it's really a great place. Like teachers do everything. They got presentation skills. They're learning how to connect with people. They're managing data. They're public speakers. They're nurses. They're
Yep.
counselors. You're everything, and anything you do in education is going to serve you anywhere else. But I think a lot of people look at it as like, oh, it's just a classroom teacher. And I think there's a little rebranding, like you said, with marketing that needs to be done on what a teacher actually is.
No, and you are spot on with everything you just said. I don't think people realize the intangibles and the skills that you develop
Yeah.
as a result
Yeah.
of being a teacher. And
Yeah.
these are skills that are transferable to any sector out
Yeah.
there. I think
Yeah.
that's what's cool about being a teacher. When you're a teacher, you can
Yeah.
easily transfer into a different sector and still have the same amount of success, sometimes even more.
Yeah.
So I think those are the things that we overlook when it comes to how we brand education and how we market the cool things, the positive
Yeah.
things that come with being a teacher.
Yeah.
It's those things you mentioned. And I hope that we can do a better job of that moving forward.
Yeah. I think so too. How you talked about it, but how important is it for black kids or kids that are going into school in these minority communities to have a black teacher or a teacher that looks like them? Because you're right. Like I've seen a lot of school with exceptions, but a lot of schools where the majority of the teachers are don't look like them and or can't connect with the students because in most cases the curriculum was built decades ago and it was generally built for white kids in the suburbs. And so how important is that in the classroom?
I mean, it's extremely important. And I think the research has proven that. And I don't know the exact numbers, but the research has shown time and time again that when there's a correlation between a third grader having a black teacher,
Yeah.
more specifically a black male teacher, that actually increases their likelihood of going to college, number one, but also you see an increase in their achievement levels academically when they have exposure to a black teacher. The
Yeah.
research is there and it's been there.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's one. But then I think also too, and I'll speak for myself, being either the only black teacher or the only black male teacher or one of the few black male teachers in the different schools I've taught in, one thing I've come to realize is they want to be in your classroom not because of what you teach.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of it. Yes, I
Right.
thought I was a pretty good math teacher,
Yeah.
but it's because of who you are. It's
All right.
because of the fact that you can relate to them in ways that other teachers aren't
Yeah.
able to relate to them. I could speak their language.
Yeah.
I could switch up on them just so that I can have that connection. Not
Yeah.
everybody can do that.
Right.
And that gives me an advantage when it comes to building relationships, positive relationships with students,
Yeah.
is because I know where they come from. I understand what the trials and tribulations are because
Yeah.
I've been in those neighborhoods. I've lived in the neighborhoods that students have lived in.
Yeah.
I'm the teacher that would go to a student's house after school hours just to talk to their mama because their mama wasn't able to come to the parent teacher conference. either because they had to work during that time or they
Hmm.
didn't have access to proper transportation to get there.
Yeah.
So I always made it a point to do a little bit extra. And the teachers and the students especially saw that. And that's what allowed me to really build, that's what allowed for them to build trust in me
Yeah.
as their teacher and to confide in me when it came to certain things that they shared in confidence. So uh, I just think being a black teacher, it means a lot. You do more than
Yeah.
what's in your scope of work. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I think when you are a black teacher, you come into the space with that understanding of you're gonna have to do more than what's required, not just to meet the needs
Right.
of your students, but also for people to recognize that you are a competent teacher.
Hmm.
And I think that's always been the case, even if it's outside of education, any profession you could think of. You ask most black people, they'll tell you the same story.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a truth that a lot of people don't recognize. And I think I tell teachers, people that are thinking about being teachers all the time, 'cause I think there's this perception of, oh, it's academics. And I'm like, man, maybe 10 to 40% of teaching is academics max. And it's relationships and it's connecting with kids and it's going above and beyond. I got a guy who I think would be an amazing teacher, and he connects with people. He's really good. And he mentioned wanting to work at a school, and I told him, hey, they got these 3 openings. They're looking for somebody to teach 3D printing and this, that, the other. And he's like, oh, I don't know anything about those subjects. They'd laugh me out of the classroom. And I tell him, I'm like, man, you can learn as you go, learn with the kids. Like, you connect with the kids and you can learn the content on the spot. But there are people that are great at content or they're great at math, but they're not great with people and they are not good teachers. It really doesn't matter how good you are at the content. Content's important. Like, it's not irrelevant, but it is, if you don't got the relationship side, you're wasting your time in the classroom. And I think a lot of people don't get that. And I had this really unique, so I almost had a reverse experience from you, but I got to teach at Carver Middle School for 3 years in Orlando, and we had there were 60 teachers. We had a really cool pilot program. Everybody had to reapply for their job, and I had the good fortune of working there, but there was probably only 5 to 7 teachers that weren't black in the building, and so our student population was close to 95% black, and they got a massive grant and they were able to pay a $70,000 bonus over 3 years to teachers. So 900 teachers applied for 60 positions, and the admin got to pick the best of the best. And they were incredible at what they did. And so I got to be, in a lot of school settings, the morale is low, because teachers aren't always getting treated well and they're not getting paid well. And I got to be in this building for 3 years where teachers are getting paid well, they're getting treated well. And I got to be around these black professionals that, the kids, I remember a kid came to me once and I was teaching computers. So I was teaching them, one of the things we did was typing, and I could type super fast. And this girl who, from a Haitian family, and she was like, well, you can do that because you're white. And I remember actually another student that corrected her and said, that's a misconception or a misbelief or however they said it. But I think it was beautiful that they would walk around that campus and every professional on the building, or the vast majority of them, looked like them, and they got to see these beautiful examples. And so it's really cool when that gets to get fleshed out, even though unfortunately it's not that common. But that experience was really unique and was really beautiful. And on the flip side of that, you would also see, like, these kids that they've gone to elementary school and the only white people they know are teachers or cops, and middle school, and they go all the way through high school. And so there is almost in some of them this, like I had to prove that I cared about them because they're like, I don't know if you're real. And so it's an interesting dynamic in schools, but it is beautiful when it's done right like that. So
Yeah, man.
I'm
Yeah, I was
curious.
just gonna say a lot.
Yeah, go ahead. Um,
I was gonna say, you just said so many valid points right now. going back to your friend who you were encouraging to sign up for a teacher position,
Yeah.
it's a shame that he felt discouraged to do so
Yeah.
because of the perception he had about what a teacher is supposed to,
Yeah.
look like. Or like I know for myself and I know for you, we went through the more traditional process. We had to go through a teacher training program.
Yeah.
We had to take certification tests in order to get our positions.
Yeah.
So we can speak teacher speak.
Right.
I could talk about curriculum development. I could talk about pedagogy all day.
Yeah.
I could tell you about Lev Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. I could tell you about Jean Piaget's stages of child development. I could tell you about all that.
Yeah.
But students aren't impressed by that.
Right. Yeah.
Adults are impressed by it. Those who are in our education realm, they're impressed by it. We're able to talk that talk. But for me, it's always been about how you can connect with students.
Yeah.
When you're able to connect with students, you're guaranteed a high level of success.
Yeah.
Because once a student likes you for you, they will do anything that you want.
That's it. 100%. I've
Even if
seen
it's
it time.
something that they dislike,
Yeah.
they'll do it on the strength of you. Like, Mr. Johnson, I'm not feeling this class, but because I like you, I'm going to listen to you. I'm
Yep.
going to do this test. I'm going to do this homework. But if it was some
Yeah.
other teacher, I'm not going to do it. Tell me I'm wrong, Fred.
And what's crazy is I remember when a lot of these schools are failing or low grades and for so many factors and the high ups put in this, well, we need to hit academics harder, more reading, more class time, less recess, less physical stuff, and it's like I remember, and I was willing to get in trouble for this. Fortunately, my admin was on board, but there was a lot of times where they would say, "Day one, you're hitting academics." And I went to this awesome training very early in my teaching career called Capturing Kids' Hearts, and highly recommend it to anybody. But we would take the first week. Let's say 36 weeks in a school year. We would take the first week, and I would tell kids, "I'm not going to teach you anything until I know your name and until I know something about you." And I would have, one year I had 240 students, and I would tell them by the end of the day 3. I'm going to know everybody's name. And I would challenge them and we'd make games out of it. But it was this like, I'm not going to try and convey information and set these expectations for you until I know you and know your name and vice versa. And it changed like that investment. So now I only have 35 weeks of academics instead of 36. And on paper, that looks bad. But the engagement after that is so much higher. And then what you did, going to a kid's house or going to a sporting event, going to their clubs and their activities, like you said it. After that, you give them a project or something, they're in because of you. They believe in you, and so they're like, I'm in. And it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't matter what the academic is at that point. Like they're following you essentially.
Right. And I think in the end, when those students move on to the other grades and they
Yeah,
graduate and they go on to become adults
yeah,
and they eventually start their own families, have their own kids, and they see you 20 years later, they're going to be like, man, Mr. Johnson, you're the best teacher because
yeah,
you used to give us free time to play during recess. You used to
yeah,
give us extra credit when we
yep,
were failing. It's never about academics. More times
right,
than not, it's about how you treated them,
yep,
how you made them feel when they were in your classroom. That's what they remember more than anything.
that's it.
When I talk to most kids, majority of the time, they're not telling me about how well I was, how well I taught math.
Right,
They didn't really care about that. It was about how I treated them, how
yeah,
I respected them, how I invested in their futures in different
yeah,
ways. Those are the memories that they hold dear to their hearts. And if we're
that's it.
able to do that for students, that alone is going to encourage students to want to pursue whatever career aspirations they have. If you just connect with them,
Yes,
you
100%.
connect. And and I think it brings me to this other point of what we should be looking at when we're recruiting teachers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if a teacher isn't able to, I don't know, pass their certification test,
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they're a bad teacher if they can't pass the certification test. Maybe it just means that they're a horrible test taker.
I sadly have
But if you
seen
put them
teachers
in a
have.
situation where they were students and they're able to perform,
Yeah.
and you put them where they can get into action, they'll show you how good of a teacher they are. But
Right.
some teachers never get the opportunity to showcase that because before they get the opportunity, they're already counted out because they couldn't pass the certification test or they couldn't pass this course
Yeah.
that would enable them to get a certification. I
Yeah.
believe that's a barrier for a lot of people,
Yeah.
the certification process.
I've seen it where good teachers have had to leave because they couldn't pass the test, and I've had their teachers that can pass the test that aren't good teachers, and the test doesn't tell you your connection with kids, sadly, and it's what's disappointing to me is and you should have high standards, but maybe we have the wrong high standards, and we're setting this bar up here for what teachers need to be, but the pay is down here, and we got so many teacher openings, and it's like, man, if you can't fill these positions, maybe everybody doesn't want to lower the standards, of course, but maybe change the standards, move the standards. There are people without a college degree that would be
Yeah,
a way better teacher than some teachers that have a doctorate, not because of the knowledge, but because of the way they can connect with kids. And there's got to be some sort
oh,
of
for sure.
adjustment there. I don't know what the answer is, but um, so I'd love to uh, switch gears here, and I know you taught for about 10 years, and then you got the chance, like you said, to move to Africa. You've been in several different places. Tell me a little bit more about what you do now, and I want to hear about your book. I'd love for the listeners to get a chance to hear about it and see how they can get it.
Yeah, so like I mentioned in the beginning, I've been abroad with my family since July 2019, and we've lived in three different countries during that time. So we started out in Ethiopia, then we moved to Sierra Leone, and then eventually moved to Zambia, where we're currently based. So for what I do, I'm a basically a freelance education consultant, and I've been working through my company, Identity Talk Consulting, for the past 6 years. And the motto for my company is stay true to the teacher in you. So what that means, especially now, is regardless of what's happening in your environment, in your school community, regardless of what the socio political issues are
Yeah,
in your county or district, you still have to stay true to your principles, stay true to your morals, stay grounded in who you are as an educator, and do what's best, do what's right by your students.
yeah,
And that's essentially what I help teachers do through Identity Talk. It's all about how do we teach teachers and school leaders how to honor their students regardless of where they come from, regardless of what languages they speak or can speak, regardless of what religions they practice, regardless of what their gender identity or sexual orientation is, whatever their identity markers are and what they bring to the table. How do we still create and cultivate spaces where students are able to have the most optimal learning experience? And that's basically what Identity Talk is about. And
awesome.
I've been able to do so many things through Identity Talk, from writing books to starting a podcast to organizing a virtual conference at the height of COVID to collaborating with so many different educators and advocates and activists all across the globe who care about what's best for young people. It's been an incredible ride, and it's been a non-linear ride because there's been
Yeah,
many ups and downs throughout that process, which I'm sure we'll have some time to get into. But as far as the books, so funny thing is the book, my first book, Shape the Teacher Identity, A Lessons That Help Define the Teacher in You, that actually was published before I founded the LLC.
Okay.
So basically when I published the book in December 2018, I was still a full-time math teacher in Boston.
Awesome.
And what I did was I started to sell my first 100 copies to my colleagues, my coworkers. They were the
Right.
ones who bought my first copies. And then I started to go to neighboring school districts and I would facilitate whole school and whole district workshops on my days off,
Awesome.
which I technically wasn't supposed to do. But I said, listen, this is
Worth
the
it.
opportunity.
And you're helping
I'm
people. Like,
swinging for
why
the
not?
fences here. I'm helping people, right?
Yeah.
So I actually was doing that pro bono for a number of months. And I also spoke at a few colleges during that time too, to pre-service teachers.
Awesome.
So it was during those engagements where I started to get questions like, hey, how much do you charge? And I couldn't answer the question
Right.
because we didn't go into education to learn how to be business people.
Right.
So I didn't have any concept of an honorarium. I didn't
Yeah.
have any concept of what my hourly rate was or how much I should be compensated. I didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
So I had to learn that on the go. And those questions were enough for me to say, all right, I need to formalize this into a business so I
Yeah.
can start getting some money for all this labor that I'm putting in. Because
Yeah.
clearly, people out here are paying money, especially districts.
Yeah.
So that's what it was for me. It was really just about being able to have these opportunities to connect with different school communities, but also to showcase what I can do.
Yeah.
And it eventually graduated to a lot of other opportunities. Um, I mean, when I got abroad and I found it difficult to get a job with the international school community, that's when I pivoted to podcasting. That's when I
Awesome.
pivoted to organizing the virtual conference that I did during COVID. That's when I pivoted to writing articles for different education media companies like an Edutopia,
Yeah.
like an Ed Post, like an Education Week, and get paid for doing it. So these were just things that I was doing because I was trying to survive. I was just
Yeah.
trying to find ways to stay connected to the field
Hmm.
while being out the classroom. But the goal was always to find a way back into the classroom, or at the very least, back into a school space where I could be around kids. But the longer I
Yeah.
was away, the more I started to discover different ways to engage with educator communities. And it got to a point where I was putting out so much content, Fred, that now if you type my name, you get like 5, 6 pages of content that I've done over the past 6 years.
Awesome.
And that was never the goal.
Yeah.
I was just trying to find ways to stay afloat because I felt like I was drowning, but
Yeah.
it turned out to be a good thing on my end.
That's awesome. It's you hit an interesting point because I think nobody gets into teaching for the money because it's one of the lowest paying jobs. But it's fascinating
Right.
because that happens, and then teachers are like, "Oh, what I do is not worth money," which is not true. But teachers kind of think that because they've just typically been low paid. But the content that teachers have and know is so valuable, and it hit me when I was teaching during COVID. I was like, well, I'm creating this content and these online classes and whatnot for kids online. I mean, we do some live stuff on Teams or whatever, but it was 100% accessible online. And I was like, I'm creating this for 200 kids that live within a 5 mile radius of where I live, but it would take no more effort to make this for 2 million people around the globe. And it's pretty cool that you've had the opportunity to take all of your great experiences in education, share that, and that other people value it. And I think it says a ton that you wrote a book while you were a teacher, and 100 people that worked in your school would want to buy it. Like, a lot of people could write a book, and not everybody wants to buy it. But the fact that you had that many colleagues that want to buy it says a lot about the type of teacher and the type of coworker you were to them. So that's congratulations. That's a really cool. I think a lot of people struggle with that. Oh, as a teacher, I shouldn't get paid. It's like, well, you should, but there's kind of a mindset shift for a lot of people in that process.
Yeah,
That's
man,
cool.
Fred. I mean, a lot of my colleagues, man, they really supported me when I wrote that first book,
Yeah, yeah,
and that's when I knew I was on the right track. But here was
yeah,
one thing that really disheartened me. So my principal and my vice principal, man, they weren't giving me that kind of love, man. They weren't they weren't parading me to their district level friends saying, "Hey, look at my teacher. He got a book out. He an author." Nah, they wouldn't give me that love at all. They didn't even
man.
they didn't even buy a copy of the book.
Wow.
None of them did. And that's
It's
and that's also when I knew there's some haters out there. Even
right.
your own school leaders can be haters.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm just like, man, why would you not want to showcase one of your staff members
right.
doing something phenomenal that's contributing to the education field in a
Yeah,
positive way?
yeah,
You don't want to support that. And yeah,
man.
and that's when I realized sometimes there are people in your community who don't want you to succeed.
Right.
They're looking for you to fail.
Yeah,
And that's not to say that that's how they felt,
right.
but that's how I felt.
Yeah,
That's how it came off to me.
yeah.
So that was the flip side of that.
I think a lot of teachers have a lot to share. Like, part of the reason I started this podcast, because I think there's so many great stories from the classroom that just stay in the classroom, and people have this negative perception of
Yeah,
schools, but there's so many good things going on that don't get shared. And I think a lot of teachers, I know for a while I did, I was like, ooh, I don't know if my, leadership would be cool with this. And I kind of got to a point where I learned, like, somebody will. And so, if this particular school or organization doesn't, then, the more you put that out there, there's so many people that can benefit from what you've learned and what you've experienced that, maybe that just says that that school's not the school. Because I think there's a lot of teachers that can just have so much to bring to the table. But like we said, sadly, teachers just haven't been valued for so long. And it's kind of changing, because teachers are one of the lowest paid professions, but people that can teach online, it's one of the best paid opportunities out there as well. But back to your book, is it for teachers? Like, is there other groups of people that would benefit? Do you recommend it for everybody? It looks awesome.
yeah. So my newest book, Learn to Relearn: Support Identity in a Culture Affirming Classroom. It's a book that's primarily for K-12 teachers,
Awesome.
and I recommend it to school leaders as well. But I've had social workers find value in this book. I've
Yeah.
had people who run NGOs that focus on young people see value in this book. Parents have gotten value in this book,
Yeah.
and they've been able to learn practical ways to teach their students or teach their children about identity, about difference, about inclusion, about how everybody's different and we should still respect them for who they are and
Yeah.
still honor them regardless of how different they are, and how important it is to learn about different communities that we're not a part of. I believe it's something that goes beyond the education realm.
Yeah.
That's what every human should do,
Agreed.
is really take the time to get to know people and not take everybody at face value.
Yeah.
You can't judge every book by its cover. Sometimes you got to take
Yeah.
some time to get to know the book. You have to open the book and get to know what the content is within it. And I believe that's the same type of mindset that we have to translate into our relations with different humans. And that's essentially what Learn to Relearn does. It allows for teachers primarily to learn those different ways and
Mm,
also to get a sense of why there's so many issues of inequity when it comes to different historically marginalized communities. So when you look at
yeah,
indigenous slash native communities, when you look at Asian American communities, Pacific Islander communities, Latinx communities, um, as well as yeah, even the Black community. When you think
yep,
about the different students coming from those communities and the different types of issues that they have within the K-12 system in the United States and beyond,
yeah,
a lot of it stems from history. So we're able to understand the history of those
yeah,
different communities and how we got to where we are.
yeah,
That context should inform the way in which you advocate for them, but also the way in which you deliver instruction to them, the way in which you fight for certain policies that allow for them to have access to different opportunities. But it all comes from not learning, but unlearning
yeah.
certain things that you've been conditioned to believe from the time you've been born and substituting that with new knowledge. And this is where the relearning comes in, where you're inputting this new knowledge that's going to allow for you to make different decisions about how you run your classroom. And if we're able to do that, we should be able to yield more positive results.
That's really good. And I think everything we said about education, it applies in education, but it applies so much further than that. And what we talk about with students and the relationships and getting to know people applies in our neighborhoods and in corporate and everywhere else. And that's why I think your book can have that wider impact outside of just teachers, and anybody can benefit from it. And when you get to know somebody, you're going to treat them differently than when you don't know somebody. And you said it, like, relearning. I think you can learn new knowledge all day, but we have to, like, we've believed lies for so long in different areas of our life. Sometimes it's about our personal success, like, oh, I could never be good enough to do this, but sometimes it's about groups of people or about students or about places, and we have these lies that we believe that we need to unlearn before we can learn something new. So that's a really creative title to your book. I love that. um, where can people get your book? People that want to buy your book, want to listen to your podcast, want to support you, how do they find you? Where should they follow you? What do you recommend?
So to find all those things, the best place to go is the Identity Talk website at identitytalk4educators.com. So it's a numeral four in the middle. Um, Now, as far as the book itself, they can go to the book's main website, relearn.com. And over there, you'll be able to buy the book, but also get some background information about the book and have access to some free learning resources. So that's a good place to go. And then, of course, you can find Learn to Relearn everywhere where they sell books online. So Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, um, Routledge, the publisher, Stenhouse, like anywhere. So make sure y'all
Awesome.
get a copy before the summer ends.
Let's go. I'll link to all that in the description for the podcast, so everybody's just one click away. Definitely recommend it. And I feel like we barely scratched the surface, so we got a lot more to talk about. So we'll have to do a sequel, because we didn't even touch a lot of different topics. I want to hear more about living in Africa and what y'all got going on there. So we're going to have to schedule another one of these for 2025.
Man, for sure. But nevertheless, still a great conversation. I appreciate you for inviting me to come on and have that discussion.
Thank you so much for sharing. You dropped a lot of wisdom today. Thanks for doing what you do. Your experience in the classroom is powerful, and what you get to do now, not just sharing with teachers, but with schools and organizations worldwide. Keep it up, man. I'm encouraged, and thankful and look forward to continuing the conversation. So, like I said, all that'll be in the description for anybody that wants to check out Kwame and follow him and get his book. But thanks again. Take care. Be safe, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you for